So a client has $1.5 million. They need about $8,000 in income. They're both 60 years old and they want to retire. And that's a common question. You know, this is the assets that we have. This is how much we need to live on or we want to live on. Can we retire? And it's not really that simple of a question, but I'll walk you through a scenario to show you, is that possible? And it's probably pretty easy for you to say, yeah, that sounds reasonable. But we'll walk through and then just show that when you go into in-depth planning, especially in retirement, there's a lot more moving pieces than meets the eye, and you don't want to leave a lot of money on the table if you don't have to. So in this example, as you can see here, we got John and Jane Dow, and they have a nest egg that is earmarked for retirement of $1.5 million. $1.1 million is in a 401k IRA. It's tax deferred. Then they have a couple $100,000 in a Roth IRA, and also a couple $100,000 in a trust account, which is just a taxable account. It could be an individual account or a brokerage account, joint tenants, but it's taxable. And then you got a tax-free account, and then a taxable account, or excuse me, a tax-deferred account. $1.1 million, that's the bulk of their nest egg. So if we come over here and just look at their probability of success, this is something that's common in our industry. You've probably seen videos where I harp on the Monte Carlo analysis pretty heavily, but this is still great software. It's a good starting point. And what this is saying is, for this client, let me move this up here. For this client, both 60, they want to retire now. They need $8,000 in retirement income. And this is showing a probability of success of 82%. Now that does not mean that they have an 18% probability of failure. That means that they have an 18% probability that they might have to change something. And a lot of time that is to reduce income. But another thing that I did was, put this on the current strategy. Another thing that I did was the retirement spending. I left that just as inflation adjusted. That means they want $8,000 in today's dollars, and they want that equivalent into the future, which means it'll go up with inflation over time. So 8,000 inflation adjusted. Now you can change these to like retirement spending smile. And what that is, in your go years when you first retire, you can travel, move around, you're healthy, still pretty young. Then as you age, especially by the time you get to your 80s, those are called your no-go years, and your spending should come down. Now, not everybody is in that boat. That's why even what I'm showing you here is not financial advice. It's just an example, a hypothetical. But there's many different ways that you can pull out income, different strategies, I guess you could say. What we utilize here is guardrails. And I have a video on that. I'll make another one with our software to show you how those guardrails work. But again, in this example, this is industry standard scenario. This is, you've probably seen this, a gazillion times. But in this scenario, this could be a, yep, everything's good. And a lot of advisors that aren't really into financial planning, they just plug in the numbers and say, hey, that looks good. You can pull out this $8,000, good to go. But what if there was other things that you should consider, especially taxes? So for a lot of people in retirement, when you ask them about, so, have you done any tax planning? They're like, why would I do tax planning in retirement? I don't have a job anymore. Well, there's a lot of factors. Some people's tax bill will increase in retirement, believe it or not. So what we're looking at here is we're going to look at just distributions. So we talked about inflation adjusted withdrawals, but there's also things to consider, like what's the sequence? So you have a tax deferred account, a tax-free account, and a taxable account. Well, industry standard is really start pulling from the taxable account first. You've already paid taxes on it, so you don't have to pay any federal income tax. Start with that. Then move on to the tax deferred accounts, which are like your IRAs, 401ks. Once that's depleted, then move to your tax-free, which is the Roth account. And you can see here, this is the key tax components. Of course, once they're pulling out a lot of money here in the early part of retirement, then RMDs kick in as they move into the 70s. And you can see that behind that, I don't know if you guys can see it very well, but there's a green line. That's your taxable Social Security. So this is just showing taxable accounts. So you don't see your Roth on here, just anything that's taxable. So if we come down here and then we decide or think, and that's something that I typically do whenever I look at a client's finances and I say, here's a data gather, just tell me where the money's located, and that's called asset location, which is it in taxable account? Is it tax deferred? Is it tax free? You know, what are the ratios of your nest egg? And if I see that the majority of their retirement nest egg is in tax deferred accounts, this is the first thing that I'm going to look at to see if it's possible to do some conversions. Will that benefit them over the long term? Now, you get a lot of pushback from CPAs sometimes that when you do conversions, it increases the tax bill in the year of the conversion. And sometimes there's a lot of pushback. But when you show that, well, it's going to save them a lot more in lifetime taxes. And in this scenario, we're just going to look at the tax adjusted ending portfolio value. So first thing I'll do is come over here and say, okay, so we're going to look at filling up a bracket. So what that means is if you're pulling out of a taxable account, your tax bill is going to be, federal income tax is going to be really low. So if we start out and we say, well, what about the 10% bracket? So depending on how much income you have, we're just going to go up to the top of that 10% bracket. We're not going to go above it, push you into a higher bracket, just to the top of the 10% bracket, doing conversions up to that point. So let me refresh this real quick. And then at the 10 bracket, if we fill that up, then it shows here that you would have about $123,000 more tax adjusted ending portfolio value. And that's at the 10% bracket. So next I'll go over here and I'll look at something a lot higher. And let me refresh that as well. And in this scenario, it's $215,000 less. So if you did Roth conversions all the way up into the 24 to 28, depending on if you're single or married filing jointly, into that bracket, you would actually do more damage, $215,000 less in portfolio value at the end. So if we go back here and then just look at the 12 to 15%. So we were at 10, then we went and saw that the higher we went, the worse it was. Well, now at the 10 to 15, it's $290,000 more in tax adjusted ending portfolio value if you filled up the 12 or 15, depending on your filing status, converted a lot more in these early years, still converting and pulling here, RMD set in, and you're still having to pull out. But then you can see by the time you're in your mid 80s, you would no longer be pulling out of that tax deferred account. The majority of your assets would now be in the tax-free account. So this is just it's just one of those things to where retirement planning isn't really that complicated. There's just a lot of moving pieces. It's like a car engine. You know, when you look at it and you've never worked on a car, you just think it's impossible to know anything about it. But if you actually just started at the basics, start at the block, and then work your way out, then you start realizing it's not that complicated. It's really just a giant air pump, right? You got the crank and the camshaft are the most important pieces, and the crank's moving the pistons up and down, the camshaft's moving the valves, which is letting exhaust and intake air in and out. And then of course, in today's vehicles, you've got electronics everywhere and sensors all over the place, but you'd still get a really granular look and then understand those cause-effect relationships. To me, it's the same with retirement planning. There's a lot of moving pieces, but if you start in the just most granular view, just like we did 82% probability, everything looks good. Now let's start looking, can we improve that? Can we look at tax planning? What about estate planning? How will estate planning impact my taxes in the future or my heirs? Another great benefit of utilizing a Roth conversion, if it is right for you and will help improve your overall situation, is it also is beneficial to your heirs if they inherit a Roth versus a traditional IRA. So now if you inherit a traditional IRA, you have to pull that out within 10 years. So imagine your adult children inherit your traditional IRA or 401k, they're already in the 24% bracket or even higher. And then they've got to start pulling money out, which is going to increase their income, increase their tax bill, which means that a portion of their inheritance is actually taxed away. If they inherit a Roth IRA, then they still have to take it out in that 10-year window. There are no RMDs, required minimum distributions, but when they pull it out, it's tax-free. So the only drawback to it would be once you pull that money out, then every year if there's any interest or dividends on it, you'd have to pay taxes on it. But again, the pros definitely outweigh the cons in that situation. And again, if you're a do-it-yourselfer, in the description there'll be a link, and you can go play around with our what we call our do-it-yourself retirement planning software. You do have to register, but you'll have access to it. You can play around with it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We created this channel in order to help as many people as possible. As a firm, we can only help so many clients and maintain a high level of service. We felt this way, we can show you exactly what we do with our clients, kind of piece by piece, software by software. And as things come up, a new situation, then we'll probably make a video about that as well. But I hope this helps. And until next time, guys, choose your advisors wisely. Your financial health depends on it.